would be honored if you would join us.
Greetings and welcome to another YouTube episode of Film Stories with me, Dan Cooper. Some interesting stories this week in the movie world about the success of the new Joker movie. I haven't seen it yet, and already that has spurred on fans, outlets, clickbait hunters maybe, to start talking about the idea that Robert Pattison's upcoming Batman film, The Batman, might in some way link itself to Joker and be the beginning of a kind of a new cinematic shared universe for DC, a kind of art house universe of sorts, because of course both actors, Pattison especially since these Twilight movies, went away and really worked for some auteurs, made smaller art house films. Joaquin Phoenix, of course, as well as being known to do the same thing. And this idea beginning to form off the back of these two very highly anticipated properties, that maybe the next time we see the Batman and Joker clash, it'll be in a movie that doesn't look anything like Suicide Squad, and instead has much more art house sensibilities. And we have, it wouldn't be the first time to see an art house comic book movie of sorts. Ang Lee's Hulk was a clear attempt to invoke art house sensibilities in a mainstream comic book movie. I'd argue it wasn't entirely successful, but I'd go back even further to see, if not fully art house, then at least art house overtones in a superhero film, back to Tim Burton's first Batman in 1989. And whilst the movie itself was a blockbuster with a fairly mainstream story, it's the art design that I want to link back to today and talk about just how important that art design was to creating a film that was so visually different that it stands out even now, today, some decades later. It stands out amongst its peers, amongst its comic book peers in that genre. Again, like I said, that make it an art house film, but certainly giving it art house overtones. The city itself, Gotham City, when Burton came to develop Batman, of course, is at a time when superhero films really didn't enjoy the same prevalence that they do now, and he wanted to create a city that was a character itself in the story. So it can't really be overstated just how much Gotham City is a character within that film, within Burton's reimagining. It's dark, it's brooding. When Sam Hamm wrote the original screenplay, this is widely known, but it is interesting. The very first line on the screenplay said, "This is a city where hell has erupted out from underneath the earth and kept on growing." It's an idea. The architecture is hopefully you're seeing on the screen in front of you right now, is just stacked on top of each other. There's definite links to Blade Runner, to Ridley Scott's Blade Runner, where and we'll, in a few other ways we'll talk about as well. There's just a huge abundance of crumbling buildings, of architectural styles. There's bridges and walkways that just kind of across the spaces of the city, creating a really claustrophobic feel, and also linking back to the German expressionist masterpiece Metropolis, of course, but Tim Burton being inspired as he was by the German expressionist movement. There's inspiration there from literature as well. It has, if you've ever read Jekyll and Hyde and read Stevenson's kind of view of a city, a seething, seedy city that's oppressive. Of course, Stevenson was writing about London, but the Burton manages to capture that feel to this idea that Gotham is almost a reflection of its citizens, and their dark hearts are reflected in the clear darkness and oppressiveness and seediness of the city. So in terms of how it was built, later iterations of Gotham would become more and more impressive through to the Nolan films, when they actually had to repurpose a hangar because they couldn't find a studio a soundstage big enough to fit in the set construction for Gotham. That was in Nolan's first Batman film, Batman Begins, in 2005. In this case, though, the city was built in Burton's '89 Batman. The city was built out of models, matte painting, and giant sets, which were constructed at Pinewood. And the genius behind the set design of Batman was Anton Furst, who would go on to win an Oscar for his work for best art and set direction in this film. Furst had previously worked with some of the great directors and also created memorable sets in the form of Company of Wolves, the Neil Jordan film, and Full Metal Jacket, the Kubrick film. And of course, if you've seen those films, you straight away it's most likely the visual aesthetic of them that will spring to mind. First created this gothic masterpiece, as I've mentioned already. The walkways, the dark alleys, it's full of gargoyles. This kind of eliciting this idea that everything is being watched, that the darkness in the city is an external force. The city itself is an external manifestation of darkness looking to destroy men, which would be an interesting counterpoint to what Nolan would do later with his films, where the evil in those films very much lay in the heart of men, and he explored those kind of moral quandaries throughout his entire trilogy, but especially in the Dark Knight and the fairy story. But however, in Burton's film, the evil, yes, it may be in the heart of men, but it was present in the city through the gargoyles that we've talked about, corruption and greed and rampant criminality across the streets. But most effective in terms of the art direction, perhaps, was the use of anachronistic set design. So you had kind of older Gothic architecture bumped up against more recent but still historical Art Deco styles, smattered with with more modern touches as well. And as I've said, it was completely anachronistic. It gives a sense of either timelessness or being out of time, an oddity, a strangeness that highlights or emphasises a kind of uncertainty that's created by being in a sense of a state of flux, a state of transition where there is no time as such. Excuse the dog barking, it's not Bat Hound. It would be a hugely successful incarnation of the city, and one that, in my view, it still surpasses every other on-screen incarnation of Gotham, especially when compared to Schumacher's kind of neo-Tokyo constructivist Gotham of his films, and then, of course, Nolan's much more realistic take. He, of course, used Chicago and New York amongst other cities, and shot them much more realistically. So will the next Batman film be an art house movie or close to it? Perhaps, but bear in mind you've already seen those art house overtones from Tim Burton all the way back in the 80s, and boy are we grateful for it. That's all I wanted to talk about today. Please don't forget that you can get more film stories. Our print magazine is out now. Issue 8 is out now. Pick up a copy. You can find more on the website. You can download Simon's podcast podcast downloader of your choice. Film Stories Junior, our magazine written by and aimed at young people, is also out and available with more details on the website. And just to boot, as if there's not enough film stories out there in the universe, there's also the Film Stories live tour happening right now. If you're interested, you want to find out if Film Stories is coming to your town, get onto our website and have a look. It's been a pleasure, and I will see you back here next week with another film story. Bye bye.